I go back quite a long way before 1963. At the age of 13, I came up to London and addressed the Council of British Archaeology in Burlington House at their January meeting. And it wasn't only Beatrice that I met when I was a sort of young teenager. I also met Shepherd Frere, who was I'm not even sure whether he'd been quite appointed to be the Professor of Roman Archaeology in succession to Wheeler at the Institute already, but if not, he was very soon to be. And he came down to the little grammar school at Thame in Oxfordshire to talk about the Roman army, and because the headmaster knew that I was interested in archaeology too, he asked me to dinner afterwards with Frere, so that's about 14 or 15 by then. A year or so later, I took a number of boys to excavate with Frere at Verulamium. It was there in a sense that I first came in contact with Wheeler. I mean, Wheeler was a legend, and to give you an example of that, I remember in the Rose and Crown, which was our local sort of watering hole, Sir Mortimer Wheeler, famous television character, but he'd also excavated at Verulamium, I think before the war, as plain Mortimer Wheeler. And I remember one old guy in the Rose and Crown saying, this Sir Mortimer, he be the son of his father. And there were sort of legends. One of the legends was that Wheeler used to circulate around the sites, which was scattered over quite a wide area, on a white horse. I do know that he came to Verulamium to visit the excavations that Frere was undertaking, and old Mrs. Frere was, it would never happen nowadays, but was selling rusty old Roman nails and potsherds to the public. Wheeler, with his great bristling moustache, turned up. Old Mrs. Frere wouldn't accept no as an answer, and it was really the hard sell. And I think Wheeler was forced to buy an old rusty nail. The wheelbarrows at St Albans, at Verulamium, all had names. One of them was called the Single Wheeler. One time when he visited, I remember there were a group of us. Frere introduced us to him, and I was so overcome by emotion that Wheeler sort of looked at me and said, "You are the pale face here." And I'm sure I was. So there were all sorts of stories about Wheeler. It was then that I really first came in contact with students from the Institute, made very good friends, and used to go to Institute parties, which were famous, even before I ever had any formal connection with the Institute. And some of those were fancy dress parties. I remember one girl who had, she wasn't exactly topless, but she went, and there's a good sort of archaeological pun, as quote-unquote exposed foundation. I also went as, and it just shows how broad-minded I was. I was really a Romanist, but I actually sort of, had a nod to other periods and areas. So I went as a quote, linear B, with two little sort of feelers and goggles and a striped shirt and wings. Anyway, that was my sort of early life and connections with the Institute, even if only sort of vicariously. I shook the dust of Oxford off my feet and came to London to read the diploma in 1963. I did the 2-year diploma of the Roman Archaeology of Western Europe, or whatever it was called, the Iron Age in Western Europe, with Roy Hodgson was my mentor for the Iron Age. So Frere was the Roman professor. I sat at his feet along with other people, some of whom were stuck in archaeology. And then so I completed in my diploma course in 65, and I was theoretically registered for a PhD, which I never really got to grips with. But in 66, Frere went to Oxford to become the Professor of Roman Archaeology there. And this had happened rather sort of suddenly, and so it was a question of how to fill the gap before the new appointee, who was Richard Goodchild, could take up the chair in London. And what they decided on was that I should give some lectures, the lectures on Roman Britain, and Frere should come up and give the lectures on the Western Roman provinces. It would have been in 66. In 67, it was decided to keep me on for yet another year, because to sort of ease Goodchild in, because it was a bit much for him to take over all the teaching right away. But I don't know whether it was the shock of teaching with me, but poor old Goodchild died after only a year in post, and then it was a question of appointing somebody else, and the person they selected was a marvellous man called Donald Strong. So again, they decided to keep me on for a year to sort of ease Donald in to help with the lecture. I seem to have this unfortunate effect on my professors, and indeed, very, very sadly, Donald died after only half a dozen years. It did last a bit longer. I feel that if Donald had lived the face of Roman archaeology in this country, quite apart from the Institute, would have been different. Who's that handsome chap on the left? Besides me, we also recruited Richard Rees. I think I was slightly jealous of Richard because, Donald was such a marvellous person. I thought, we don't want anybody else. Take him away, take him away. But Richard, actually, I have to pay him a great compliment because I think he was the only person of my colleagues at the Institute who was interested not just in archaeology, but was actually seriously interested in teaching. What's that? He was actually interested in what we were trying to do with young minds and so on. Richard has his own students and pupils, and in a sense created a sort of school of archaeological thinking and so on. I just want to end by running through a few slides which say something about the social life of the Institute. Now, one of our previous speakers had said that there really wasn't much social life, except if you went on field trips. Well, that's, I suppose, whatever turns you on, baby. David Starter was known to be a tandemist. But I think, there are other things in life besides field trips. And this was the first play that I was involved with, which was The Harrowing of Hell. This was in 1977, which we used to put on in the Middle Ages. This mystery play that I put on with not only the students, but also I found there was a fine sort of ironic touch about this. I don't think he really appreciated it, but that is Richard Rees as an angel. With large polystyrene wing. And that's me as a devil, I think, with this Hell's Mouth that I produced. This was in Gordon Square. That Hell's Mouth was useful because we used it as a prop in the next play that we did, which was The Creation and Fall, which was another mystery play, and this was done in our basement. In those days, the basement ran right through from almost one end of the building to the other. And it was a great place for parties, and it seems to me very sad that we no really longer have that facility. But perhaps Steve can recreate the basement. So that's me. I was the devil in the last play, and in this one I think I'm God. And then these characters are the principals of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. That's me on the left, that handsome one. I was the Green Knight, and this is Mark Redknapp, a very distinguished archaeologist now. Mark was Sir Gawain, and that's Jackie Waller, and she was the fair lady or something like that. She had to seduce Mark Redknapp. Then that's a chap called Paul Smith, who was somebody called Sir Verulamium. Well, there are three of the principals, and Mark Redknapp made his own armour. In fact, we all tended to do our own costumes. This is me as the Green Knight. Notice this sort of Triskele ornament on my chest. It's not actually on my chest, it's just opposite my head, and I'm looking out through that. Because the Green Knight challenges me at the court of King Arthur, where else, to have a game. And the game is one of decapitation. And he says, you can go first, you've got to decapitate me, but only on condition that I can later then decapitate you. Mark Redknapp, Sir Gawain, decapitated the Green Knight, and then he was sort of brushing his hands, but then the Green Knight picks his head up. Remember, you're part of the bargain. So a year later, we set off on horseback. At least Mark Redknapp sets off, not actually on the horse. And then it's my turn. Of course, it all ends up happily. But from Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, we went on to Beowulf. That is King Hrothgar, Prince of the Spear Danes, glorious in battle, built him a huge hall, its high roof towering high to heaven, strong to withstand the buffet of war. But over the fens beyond the moor, a monster lurked, fiend from hell, Grendel his name. Grendel, of course, goes to Heorot and eats people. But young Beowulf, Prince of the Geat, that's Beowulf, played by Gavin Evans. And Gavin really should have been Sir Gawain, shouldn't he? But he wasn't. Institute parties. This was the theme of the party, which was held in Gordon Square, was a children's book. And so here is Professor Wilkes, who took over from Donald Strong, and he is Paddington Bear. And there is Susan Wilkes, or Susan Walker as she was, and she's gone as Christopher Robin. There is Judy Medrington as a Bella St. Trillian. That little creature is Peter Rabbit, my son John, who has just become a father. And there I'm Mr. McGregor, and I'm actually wearing the McGregor tuft and scarf. In 1987, here we are visiting the Roman department. Professor Evans, Princess Anne, John Wilkes, and my friend Peter Connolly, who was one of the very first honorees we ever had at the Institute. And this is the Roman saddle which he constructed, which is an absolutely brilliant piece of work, both academically and from a sort of practical point of view. Actually, I mentioned the principles, but who's that handsome-looking chap? Peter explained how he'd arrived at this reconstruction, but he also demonstrated it. Now, one of the big things about the saddle is Romans didn't have stirrups, so it's quite hard to get onto a horse. It's particularly hard to get on if you've got these projecting pommels. You can do damage to yourself. The horse is there, the two near side pommels, you take a little sort of thing, you put your hands on them, and you leap into the air, you take this hand away, you move this leg over, and it's easy, really. And this is Peter Conrad doing it, and he's done it. In the summer of 1987, I put on a thing at the Institute which was called Roman Army Day. I had models of Hadrian's Wall and really good stuff like that. And then we had lectures in this room. Then we took over the college, and they'd taken us over, but we thought it was only fair. So there in the centre is John Wilkes, distributing largesse in the form of golden-coloured coins. There's me on the left, Richard Rees, various young Armenian princes who are hostages in Rome time, and then the Ermine Street Guard. We got press coverage of this great event, Hammond High, and we're now looking from the podium, from the portico towards the cruciform building, and you'll see there are two horses, and this is because we laid on the services of the mounted police, and they then escorted this troop of Roman soldiers down the Gower Street to the British Museum, where they performed marches to help peace protect us. I think it was the other way around. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.